I met Daniel Hargrove on a Tuesday that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet glue. March 14th, 2023. I remember the date because I wrote it down on a yellow legal pad I still keep in my kitchen drawer. The same drawer where my late wife, Margaret, used to keep grocery coupons clipped with surgical precision. Funny what survives a marriage. Not the people. Just the habits. The office was on the 4th floor of a beige building downtown. The kind that looks respectable from a distance, but up close reveals chipped paint around the elevator buttons and a flickering fluorescent light that hums like it has something to confess. "Mr. Caldwell?" the receptionist asked without looking up. "That's me," I said. My voice sounded older than I felt, or maybe exactly as old. She gestured toward a waiting area with 2 leather chairs that had given up on comfort sometime during the Bush administration. A glass table sat between them, stacked with outdated financial magazines. I picked one up, Forbes, October 2021, and put back down. I've never trusted advice that comes too late. At 10:17 a.m., the door opened. "Mr. Caldwell," he said warmly. "Daniel Hargrove." He had one of those firm handshakes that feels rehearsed. Not strong, just practiced. His suit was navy. His tie a careful shade of burgundy. Everything about him suggested competence without arrogance. The kind of man you trust with paperwork. That was my first mistake. "Please come in." His office was different from the rest of the building. Polished walnut desk, framed diplomas from Columbia, a small brass lamp casting a soft, deliberate light. There was even a faint scent of something expensive, cedar maybe. "You were referred by Margaret Ellis?" he asked, sitting down. "My accountant," I nodded. 30 years. "Then you're in good hands," he smiled. "She only sends me clients she trusts." I should have asked how many of them were still speaking. Instead, I took out my folder. Inside it were 20 years of my life reduced to paper. Property deed, bank statements, retirement accounts, insurance policies. Numbers that once felt like security now felt like something fragile. Something that could be moved. "My wife passed in 2021, I said. "I've been reorganizing things." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and for a moment, his voice softened in a way that felt real. Margaret had handled everything. Bills, taxes, even the passwords written neatly in a little blue notebook I still haven't had the courage to throw away. After she died, I found myself staring at numbers like they were written in a foreign language. "I want everything clean," I said. "Legally sound. No surprises." "Of course," he nodded. "That's exactly what we do here." He reached for a pen on blank. I noticed. Expensive but not flashy. Like everything else about him. "Let's start with your assets." We talked for nearly an hour. The house alone, 3 bedrooms, paid off in 2018, was valued at $780,000. My retirement accounts totaled just over $412,000. Savings, $186,000. A modest portfolio, carefully built over 47 years of electrical engineering work. Not wealth, but not nothing. Altogether, he said, tapping a calculator, you're looking at approximately $1.4 million in assets. Hearing it said out loud made me uncomfortable. Numbers like that attract attention, like leaving food out in the open. "I don't have children," I said. "No one to leave it to." "That simplifies things," he said quickly. Too quickly. "What I'd recommend," he continued, "is establishing a comprehensive legal structure. Trusts, power of attorney, asset protection. It ensures everything is handled exactly the way you want. And if something happens to me," he smiled again, that same measured smile, "then everything proceeds smoothly. No court delays, no complications." He slid a document across the desk. "Just a preliminary authorization. Allows me to begin reviewing and organizing your accounts." I glanced at it. Dense text. Paragraphs stacked like bricks. Somewhere near the bottom, a signature line waited patiently. "Standard procedure?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. I picked up the pen. Outside, somewhere down the street, a siren wailed briefly and then faded. The kind of sound you ignore if it's not meant for you. I signed my name, Edward Caldwell. The ink looked steady, stronger than I felt. "Excellent," Daniel said, collecting a paper. "We'll take very good care of you, Mr. Caldwell." I believed him. That was my second mistake. And, as I would later discover, not even close to my last. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. By April, Daniel had become part of my routine, not in any grand, dramatic way. He didn't call every day or demand attention. That would have been obvious. Suspicious, even. No, he worked the way dampness seeps into a house. Quietly, gradually, until one day you notice the smell and realize it's everywhere. Every Thursday at 9:30 a.m., my phone would ring. "Mr. Caldwell, just a quick update," he'd say, his voice smooth measured. "We're making excellent progress." Progress. That was his favorite word. The first real step, he explained, was consolidation. "You have accounts scattered across 3 institutions," he told me during our second meeting on April 6th. "It's inefficient, harder to protect." We sat across from each other again. That same walnut desk between us like a line I didn't yet realize I was crossing. "I've managed fine for 40 years, I said. "And you've done well," he replied quickly. "But the system has changed. Regulations, tax exposure, probate risks. It's not the same landscape anymore." He said it like weather, something inevitable. He handed me another document. "This allows me to coordinate directly with your banks. Purely administrative." I skimmed it this time, or at least I told myself I did. There were words like authorization, representation, limited access. All reasonable, all comforting in their vagueness. "Limited," I repeated. "Strictly," he nodded. I signed. That afternoon, I stopped at the grocery store on Maple Street. Bought the same things I always do: half a loaf of rye bread, a carton of eggs, black coffee. The cheap kind Margaret used to pretend she didn't like, but always drank anyway. Routine as a way of making everything feel normal, even when it isn't. By late April, the numbers began to move. Not dramatically, not in a way that would trigger alarm bells. A transfer here, $12,500 from savings into a new protected account. Another there, $38,000 from my brokerage into something Daniel called a shielded trust structure. Temporary positioning. He explained over the phone on April 27th at exactly 9:32 a.m. "We're optimizing your exposure." Exposure. Another word I didn't question enough. "Will I still have access?" I asked. "Of course," he said, almost amused. "It's your money." That answer should have satisfied me. Instead, it lingered, like a note played just slightly off-key. In May, the paperwork grew thicker. Folders, tabs, color-coded sections. He even had his assistant, Lydia, a quiet woman who never quite met my eyes, prepare summaries. "Just sign where indicated," Daniel would say, tapping neatly placed sticky notes. "Sign here, initial there, date at the bottom. May 11th, power of attorney. Limited, purely precautionary. May 18th, trust amendment, standard language, nothing unusual. May 25th, asset transfer authorization, $96,000. That number made me pause. 96,000? I asked, looking up. Daniel didn't hesitate. Short-term reallocation. It allows us to secure a more favorable position before the end of the quarter. He said it so smoothly, I almost felt foolish for asking. Almost. "And this is necessary?" "Mr. Caldwell," he leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "You hired me to protect what you built. That's exactly what I'm doing." There was a quiet confidence in his tone. Not defensive, not pushy, certain. I signed. Of course I did, because by then, it wasn't just about the documents anymore. It was about trust, and trust, I've learned, doesn't break all at once. It stretches, it bends, and sometimes it signs its own name without realizing what it's giving away. The first crack appeared in my kitchen, not in his office. June 3rd, 2023, a Saturday morning. I was standing by the sink, watching the coffee drip too slowly into a chipped ceramic mug Margaret had bought in Vermont sometime in the late 90s. The radio murmured in the background. Weather, traffic, something about rising interest rates. Ordinary noise, ordinary day, until I opened my bank app. Now, I'm not a paranoid man. Never have been. 47 years working at the power plant teaches you to trust systems, until they give you a reason not to. That morning, something felt off. The balance in my primary checking account read $14,206.33. I stared at it longer than necessary. It wasn't wrong exactly, just lower than I expected. I tapped through the transactions. Groceries, utilities, a $220 payment to my insurance. Nothing unusual. But then I saw it. May 31st transfer, $48,000 outgoing. No note. No destination I recognized. I frowned, leaning closer as if the numbers might rearrange themselves under pressure. $48,000 doesn't just slip away. I checked the previous weeks. April 27th, $38,000. May 25th, $96,000. And now this. The pattern sat there quietly, like something waiting to be acknowledged. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone bitter. At 10:02 a.m., I called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. Mr. Caldwell, good morning. His tone didn't change. That, more than anything, unsettled me. I'm looking at my account, I said. There's a transfer here I don't recognize. $48,000 on May 31st. A brief pause. Not long enough to alarm most people. Long enough for me. Ah, yes, he said smoothly. That's part of the second stage allocation we discussed. We discussed a lot of things, I replied. I don't recall that number. You signed the authorization on May 25th, he said. Papers shuffled faintly on his end. Section 3B, I believe. Section 3B. It sounded official, precise, and completely meaningless to me. I'd like to see that document again, I said. Of course, he replied quickly. I'll have Liddy email it over within the hour. The call ended. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Margaret used to say, if something feels wrong, it usually is. I hadn't listened to that voice in a long time. At 10:47 a.m., the email arrived. Subject line, documentation as requested. Attached was a PDF, 12 pages, dense text, legal language that seemed designed not to be read, so much as endured. I printed it out. Old habit. Paper makes things real. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one Margaret and I had bought in 1982 for $600 cash, and began to read, slowly, line by line. At first, everything looked familiar. The structure, the phrasing, even my own signature at the bottom of page 8. Then I reached section 3B. There it was, buried halfway through a paragraph that ran nearly half a page long. The client hereby grants the representative discretionary authority to reallocate, transfer, or otherwise manage funds across designated accounts, including but not limited to third-party custodial structures deemed appropriate under prevailing fiduciary standards. I read it twice, then a third time. Discretionary authority, third-party structures, words that meant everything and nothing. My signature sat just below it, clean, confident, unquestioning. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking softly under my weight. For the first time since March 14th, I felt something shift. Not panic, not yet. Just awareness, like stepping onto a staircase and realizing there's one more step than you expected. You don't fall immediately, but your balance is gone. At 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. Daniel, just wanted to make sure you received the document, he said. I did, I replied. And everything looks in order? I looked down at the paper again. At my name, at the paragraph I didn't remember agreeing to. Yes, I said after a moment. A pause. Then, good. We're right on track. Right on track. After the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. The coffee had gone cold. The house was quiet. And for the first time, I began to wonder, not what I had signed, but what I hadn't read. It's strange thing, suspicion. It doesn't arrive like a storm. No thunder, no lightning. Just a quiet pressure behind the eyes. Like a headache you pretend isn't there. For 3 days, I tried to ignore it. June 4th, Sunday, I went to church, sat in the same pew Margaret and I had shared for 26 years. Mrs. Henderson asked how I was doing. I said can't complain, which is what people say when they don't want to explain. June 5th, Monday, I cleaned out the garage. Found an old toolbox, rusted hinges, screws sorted into jars Margaret had labeled in that neat handwriting of hers. Phillips, flathead, miscellaneous. She believed in naming things properly. Maybe that's why what bothered me wasn't the money. It was the language. On Tuesday morning, June 6th, at exactly 8:12 a.m., I sat down again with the documents. This time I didn't skim. I read like a man who had nothing else left to trust. Page 1, definitions. Page 2, scope. Page 3, limitations or what pretended to be limitations. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. Let it go cold beside me. By page 9, my eyes were burning. By page 11, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. Daniel didn't write documents to be read. He wrote them to be survived. Then I reached the last page. Page 12. There was no dramatic music, no sudden realization that knocks you out of your chair. Just a paragraph. Shorter than the others. Quieter. Almost polite. In the event of incapacitation, absence, or administrative necessity, the client hereby authorizes the representative to act as full legal proxy with irrevocable authority over all assets, holdings, and properties, including the right of transfer, liquidation, and reassignment at the representative's discretion, without requirement for further consent or notification. I read it once, then again, slowly. Irrevocable authority. All assets. No notification. My hand moved, almost on its own, down the page, and there it was, my signature. June 1st, 2023. I don't remember signing that page. That's the part people don't understand. They imagine betrayal as something loud, obvious, a moment you can point to. But this was quiet, stacked between 10 other pages, slipped in among routine authorizations, hidden behind language that looked like every other paragraph I'd already trusted. I sat back in my chair. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second landing harder than the last. I thought about the numbers. $96,000, $48,000, $38,000. Over $180,000 already moved. Not stolen. Not yet. Just repositioned. Legally. Carefully. Patiently. Like furniture being rearranged in a house you still believe belongs to you. At 9:03 a.m., my phone rang. I didn't need to look. Mr. Caldwell. Daniel's voice came through, warm as ever. Just checking in. We're finalizing the next phase this week. Next phase. I looked at the paper in front of me, at the sentence that had quietly handed him everything. You said this was standard? I said. A pause. Barely noticeable. It is, he replied. For comprehensive protection. Protection. I let out a small breath. Not quite a laugh. Daniel, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. What exactly have I authorized you to do? Another pause. Longer this time. Measured. Well, he said carefully. As your legal representative, I now have the flexibility to manage your assets in your best interest. Flexibility. That word again. Soft. Harmless. Dangerous. And if I disagree? I asked. You won't, he said lightly. That's why you hired me. The line went quiet for a moment. Not disconnected. Just waiting. I looked around my kitchen, the table, the cabinets, the small details of a life built slowly and honestly. And for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something sharp cut through the fog of routine. Not grief. Not confusion. Clarity. I see, I said. We ended the call a few seconds later. No raised voices. No accusations. Just silence. But as I sat there, staring at that final page, I understood something with absolute certainty. I hadn't hired a lawyer. I had signed myself out of my own life. And Daniel Hargrove, he was already holding the pen. There's a particular kind of anger that doesn't shout. It settles. Heavy, cold, precise. That's what I felt on June 6th after I read that last page. Not panic, not fear. Something quieter and far more useful. By 10:30 a.m., I had showered, shaved, and put on a clean shirt. The blue one Margaret used to say made me look less stubborn than I actually am. I took a folder, every page, every signature. Then I drove, not to Daniel's office, to the bank. First National on Elm Street. Brick building, older than most of the people working inside it. I've had an account there since 1989, back when a handshake still meant something, and people looked you in the eye when they handled your money. Some still do. Morning, Mr. Caldwell, said Janet from behind the counter. Late 50s, sharp eyes, the kind that don't miss details. Janet, I nodded. I need a favor. She saw the folder in my hands. Noticed the way I held it. Office, she said quietly, already standing. We sat down behind a glass door that muffled the noise of the lobby. A small room, 2 chairs, a desk with a computer that looked newer than it needed to be. What's going on? She asked. I slid the papers across to her. I want you to tell me what I signed. No dramatics. No long explanations. Just that. She adjusted her glasses and started reading. At first, her expression stayed neutral, professional, controlled. Page 3, nothing. Page 6, a slight frown. Page 9, she leaned closer. By the time she reached the last page, she didn't speak right away. She took the glasses off. That was when I knew. Edward, she said carefully. Who is this man? My lawyer. Her mouth tightened just slightly. This isn't standard. I felt something in my chest loosen. Not relief, exactly. Just confirmation. What is it then? I asked. She tapped the last paragraph. This is a general power of attorney with asset control provisions buried inside broader language. But it's worse than that. Worse how? You didn't just give him access, she said, looking me directly in the eyes now. You gave him discretionary ownership authority under certain conditions. Ownership, I repeated. Yes. The word landed differently than all the others. Ownership isn't flexible. Ownership isn't administrative. Ownership is final. He can move funds, she continued, reassign accounts, even transfer property titles if he claims administrative necessity. And because of how this is written, she tapped the page again. You've limited your ability to challenge those actions quickly. I let out a slow breath. How much has already moved, she asked. About $180,000. Her jaw tightened. Into accounts you control? I don't know. That was the worst part. Not knowing. Janet turned back to her computer, typing quickly. Give me a second. The keys clicked sharply in the quiet room. After a minute, she stopped. Some of the transfers went into custodial accounts under a legal entity, she said. Hargrove Legal Management Group. That his company? Yes, she said. Which means your money is no longer sitting where you think it is. I nodded slowly. There it was. Not suspicion anymore. Structure. Can I stop it? I asked. She hesitated. Not alone, she said. And not like this. I almost smiled at that. Not out of humor. Out of recognition. Margaret used to say, if you find yourself in a bad position, don't argue with it. Change the position. What do I need? I asked. Janet didn't hesitate this time. A better lawyer. There was a pause. Then she added more quietly and quickly, before he moved the rest. I gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. For 3 months, I had been signing whatever was placed in front of me, trusting process, trusting language, trusting a man who knew exactly how much I didn't understand. That part was over. Janet, I said, standing up. Can you recommend someone? She gave a short nod. I already have. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a business card. Laura Bennett Esq. Litigation. Asset recovery. Fraud. I looked at the card for a moment, then slipped it into my pocket. Because for the first time since March 14th, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Laura Bennett didn't waste time on sympathy. That was the first thing I noticed when I met her on June 7th at 2:00 p.m. Her office was smaller than Daniel's. No walnut desk, no polished diplomas arranged like trophies. Just a metal filing cabinet, a functional desk, and a coffee machine that looked like it had survived a minor war. But her eyes, sharp, direct, impatient with nonsense. Those I trusted immediately. You signed this, she asked, flipping through the pages. Yes. Did you read it? Not properly. She nodded once. No judgment. Just a fact placed neatly on the table between us. Good, she said. I frowned. Good. It means we're not dealing with incompetence, she replied. We're dealing with design. She turned the last page toward me and tapped the paragraph I now knew too well. This wasn't an accident, Mr. Caldwell. This was structured to be overlooked. I leaned back slightly. I figured as much. She studied me for a moment, as if measuring something. Do you want your money back, she asked, or do you want him stopped? Both. A corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. Good answer. She stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out a thin folder. Here's the problem, she said. Technically, he hasn't stolen anything yet. He's operating within the authority you gave him. Then how do we fight it? We don't fight it, she said calmly. We force him to act. That sentence stayed with me. Force him. How? I asked. She sat back down. People like Hargrove rely on 2 things, she said. Silence and time. They move slowly legally, and they assume their clients won't understand what's happening until it's too late. That sounds accurate. She nodded. So we removed both. She slid a blank legal pad toward her and began writing. Tomorrow morning, 10:00 a.m. You have a scheduled meeting with him, correct? Yes. Good. You're going to keep it. And say what? Nothing unusual, she said. You'll act exactly as you have been. That didn't sit well. You want me to pretend? I want you to give him confidence, she corrected. Because confident men make faster moves. I watched her carefully. And you? I'll be there. I blinked. In the room? Not at first, she said, but close enough. There was a pause. Then she added almost casually, and you won't be the only one listening. Something cold and precise settled into place in my chest again. Not anger this time. Strategy. June 8th, 9:52 a.m. I arrived at Daniel's office 10 minutes early. Same building. Same flickering light. Same receptionist who barely looked up. Routine. That word again. But this time, I noticed everything. The clock on the wall. Slow by about 30 seconds. The hum of the air conditioning. Too loud for such a small space. The way my own hands rested calmly in my lap. At 10:01 a.m., the door opened. Mr. Caldwell. Daniel said with that same practiced warmth. Right on time. Always, I replied. We shook hands. His grip hadn't changed. That almost made me laugh. Inside, the office looked exactly as it had before. Walnut desk. Soft lighting. Everything in its place. Except now I knew what it cost. Let's finalize the next phase, he said, sitting down. We're in an excellent position. Excellent. He slid a new set of documents toward me. Thicker this time. More tabs. More places to sign. I looked at them. Then, at him. Daniel, I said evenly. Before we continue, I have a few questions. Something flickered in his eyes. Quick. Controlled. Of course, he said. That's what I'm here for. I nodded slowly, and for the first time since I met him, I wasn't the one being managed. I was the one setting the pace. And somewhere just beyond that office door, he had no idea who else was about to walk in. There's a particular silence that settles in a room just before something breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a shift in the air, like pressure dropping before storm. I felt the moment I asked my question. Daniel, I said, resting my hand lightly on the stack of papers. Before I sign anything else, I'd like to revisit the authority I've granted you. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with a new kind of attention. Not the warm, reassuring look from before. This one was sharper, measured. Of course, he said finally. What specifically concerns you? I tapped the last page of the previous document, the one I had brought with me. This clause, I said, irrevocable authority, full asset control. His eyes flicked down then back up. That's standard language for comprehensive management, he replied smoothly. We've discussed this. We discussed protection, I said, not ownership. A pause, small, but this time it didn't belong to me. Mr. Caldwell, he said, folding his hands neatly on the desk. I think there may be some misunderstanding about legal terminology. I don't think there is, I interrupted. That was the first time I had ever cut him off. It landed. You could see it. Just a fraction of a second. But enough. I'd like you to explain, I continued, my voice calm, why my funds are currently sitting in accounts under Hargrove Legal Management Group. There it was. No more soft language. No more reallocation. For the first time since March 14th, Daniel didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened barely. That structure, he said carefully, is part of the protective framework we implemented. It shields your assets from me? I asked. Silence. Heavy now. Real. No, he said, a little more firmly, from external risk. I nodded slowly. And the clause allowing you to transfer property titles without notification? That would only be used under specific circumstances, he replied. In your best interest. My best interest, I repeated. The words tasted different now. Across the room, the clock ticked. 10:11 a.m. Right on schedule. I leaned back in my chair. Daniel, I said quietly, I'd like to terminate our agreement. That did it. The mask didn't fall completely, but it slipped. You can't do that immediately, he said. A little too quickly. There are processes, legal obligations, transitional steps. Understand, I said. That's why I brought someone who can help with that. And right on cue, there was a knock on the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. Daniel's eyes moved to the door, then back to me. What is this, he asked. Clarity, I said. The door opened. Laura Bennett stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Behind her, a man in a gray suit followed, mid-50s. Badge clipped his belt. Daniel stood up halfway from his chair. "What is the meaning of—" "Daniel Hargrove," Laura said evenly, placing a folder on his desk. "We'll keep this simple. We have documentation of misrepresented fiduciary authority, undisclosed asset transfers totaling $182,500, and contractual language designed to obscure material control." Each word landed like a nail. Sharp, precise, final. "This is a civil matter," Daniel said quickly, regaining some of his composure. "Everything was signed, fully authorized." "That's one interpretation," Laura replied. "Another is constructive fraud through deliberate obfuscation." The man beside her finally spoke. "Sir, we'd prefer to resolve this cooperatively." That badge wasn't decoration. I watched Daniel closely. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain, not defeated, not yet. But the certainty was gone, replaced by calculation. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. Laura didn't hesitate. Immediate reversal of all transfers. Full relinquishment of power of attorney. Written acknowledgement of overreach. Today. "And if I refuse?" Another small pause. Then she said very calmly, "Then we let a judge read page 12. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't the one sitting there trying to understand the language. I already had. And now, so would everyone else.